everybody. Raina here, host of Book Banter. I am very excited to talk to Darby Baham again for this episode of Book Banter. She has been on the show multiple times, and every single time it is absolutely a joy to talk to her. I'm just looking forward to catching up and of course talking about her book, but just catching up with her. And if you don't know, Darby is an author and a storyteller. She has made it her mission to make women like herself feel seen, heard, and know that love and romance is possible for them, for everybody. And she is a former Times Picayune and Washington Post contributor. She used all of that knowledge and information and that experience that she got from working there to put into her Friendship Chronicles series that she writes for Harlequin. We will be talking about her 6th book in that series, A Risk Worth Taking. This one doesn't come out until July 29th, so we're getting a little bit of a sneak peek of her book. This series is a love letter to female friendships, which is one of my favorite parts of the entire series, and offers an intimate look at all the dynamics of the love lives of Black women. And this series is amazing. This book it's my 2nd favorite, I think, in the series. But this is the 6th one. So we're going to dig into it here tonight. If you have any questions or you just want to say hi, drop those in the comments and we'll answer those questions during the event this evening. And without further ado, let me welcome Darby to Book Banter.
Hi, Raina.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining me again for Book Banter.
Thank you for having me. This is always one of my favorite conversations to have, so I'm looking forward to it.
I remember when we did our first one of these, and it's so these kind of conversations, you don't get a ton of prep because you just not a lot to prep. It's just a conversation. And we didn't know each other, but by the end I was like, I think we're gonna be best friends. I'm in. And here we are.
So there you go.
On book 6. That's amazing. So tell me one thing, how do you feel being this far into this series? I have all my how is it? How did you when you started, did you think this was even happening? This was possible?
I mean, that's a great question. The writer in me thinks that I'm gonna have 80 plus books, right? But then the glass half empty part of me is let's hope that we get past 1 and let's go from there. I mean, I'm honestly just grateful that we're at number 6 and that people are resonating with the stories, that they feel as you said in your intro, that there's something about it that makes them feel seen. There's something about what the characters are going through in their relationships that they can relate to enough that they want to pick up the story and read what happens next. And I love, and this is a credit to Harlequin because I didn't actually have this idea, but I love that it's all part of the same universe, but you get a different story with each one. So you can pick up number 6 and start there if that's what you want to do. You don't have to have read the first 5 now. If you want to, you can. But you can pick up number 6 and not feel oh gosh, I don't know what's going on. But for the person who's read it from the beginning, they have little Easter eggs that they can follow through. And, there are little things that they can feel oh, I remember when such and such did this, right? So either way, you get a little bit of goodness with you. And so I really like that.
Yeah, and I'm going to definitely second that. It is a series, but you can pick up whichever one you find first, you can get your hands on. That's where you should start. Just start there. Yeah. But the friend circle overlaps. So yeah, some people are mentioned in this one that aren't even in it, but if you know that, you can go back and read those.
Yeah.
And actually, Linda has a question that
Hi, Linda.
fits in with this. Do you have a big circle of friends like your characters, like the characters in your book?
I do. And I actually have a few different circles, funny enough. And I mean, my friendships are so important to me that I tend to call them my village. So I have my New York village, right? I have the people who I've been living here almost 9 years at this point, and those are the folks that really like make New York feel like a second home to me. But then I have like my girlfriends that I've known since college, and a lot of times, I steal inspiration, borrow, grab inspiration from them for the book series, because they are the ones who like hold me down and they're the ones who are quick to tell me like, you're doing this thing scared and you should stop, right? And I don't necessarily always want to hear that, just like the characters in the book. But I don't know how I would be able to navigate certain things without them. And then of course I have like friends from back home that are now family at this point, like my best friend, I'm the godmom of two of her kids. She calls my mom at this point, right? So we've known each other since 5th grade. And so all of those like friend groups for me have become like that much more important. And I try to like embed at least pieces of them into, this like extended friendship girl friendship group.
I love how you do have those friendships that have been around for a long time, but then there are new people, and it didn't happen much in this book really, but at least one of your other ones where there's a new friend introduced, somebody's got a coworker, and then the group is like, okay, we're cool. Are we cool? Like, yeah. you gotta make it through that, like, get into, can you hang? Are you cool? We gotta figure that out. Yeah. And
I think that's real life, really right? Realistic. Yeah. We all grew up on, at least I did. I grew up on Sex and the City and Girlfriends and Living Single and that kind of stuff. And you think of those as being like that 4 core group. But really, a lot of us spend so much time, especially pre-pandemic, at work. And so a lot of times those people become friends, and you've got to decide, like, are they just a work friend, or are they someone who's becoming more than that? And then you got to bring them into the circle, and that close group is like, okay, let's see. Mm-hmm. You got good judgment because you're like me, but let me see how the dynamic works between us. So.
Yeah, and sometimes there are like separate groups, and then there's those people who can make it in multiple groups. So that's
I like Venn diagrams when it comes to friends.
For real.
If you can get into a bunch of them, like, you're A-okay with me.
Right. You're making it, you're moving up the friendship ladder, the more circles you can fit in with. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, because then I don't have to stress about who I'm going out with. Like, you can come with me no matter what. In this book, so we briefly talked about love triangles before. There is a love triangle in this book, a new person and an old person.
Yeah.
And an old friend. And I, again, that dynamic, we get to see that again in a different way, in a romantic way. Yeah. Which was fun for me as a reader. Was it fun for you as a writer? Like,
it was tricky, but it was tricky in like a fun way, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I knew that I wanted to write a friends to lovers romance. And just the ways that can feel really risky. I've done that before, not to great success, but the ways that you can feel like, oh, maybe you're either starting to really like something about this person in a romantic way, or you always had some sort of like feelings about them, but you didn't want to like go there. And I don't, we hear about friends to lovers all the time, but I like to put in like the real, like, scary parts of what that means into my stories, right? And so to me, there's a lot scary about thinking about taking that risk, because if that person's really a close friend, you risk not just losing like your partner if it doesn't work out. You risk losing this person you've come to, rely on as a friend as well. But then it could also just be really amazing. So you're like balancing that out. And as I was just conceptualizing what I wanted to do with that story, I was like, what if there's someone else in the picture? And that makes the question of, am I going to take that risk that much more important, right? Because it's not like that person is the only person in the picture, but you've got another, she's got another guy who, not to say too much about the story, but who, checks off all these things that she thinks she wants. And so it's like, well, here's this really good looking, charming guy, and he doesn't have all those risks that my friend has. But it may not also be as amazing as it would be if I take the risk with my friend. And so, like, what is that? What does it take for her to like go through some of that like pros and cons list in her head, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately decide what's best for her. So yeah.
And I come back all the time in all of your books to a lot of the conversations that the girls have together. So and in the beginning, Gigi's, who is Keisha and Reagan. Yes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. They are really pushing her towards the friend.
Yeah.
And
annoyingly so, actually.
Annoyingly so. Right. They are like, just do this thing already. Yeah. And she's listing all these things you had just said, well, it's a friend, and so that could mess this up, and there could be all these things that happen. And besides, we don't really like each other anyway, whatever. Yeah. Right.
There's always got to be a little bit of denial there.
Yes.
A little bit of self-denial, right?
And I actually appreciated in the beginning of this one, they are both completely like, are you kidding? No.
Yeah.
Like, but there isn't like one of them kind of in and the other one kind of out. No, they were both like, nah, this is not going to work. But I loved that conversation because I could see them like pushing her, but also I'm in like Gigi's shoes and I'm thinking like, okay, these friends are just not thinking about the bigger picture. They're in it for the fun of the drama of wouldn't that be great, right? But they're not thinking beyond that. And that would be such me, like, I'm an overthinker. So I'm like, well, obviously this and this and this. Like, you just haven't, here are like 8 things that you guys haven't thought of. Thank you very much.
Right.
But let's move on because you guys are just want the show, right? You're not in it. That wouldn't be them, their lives that they have to, like, they just have to wait it out and enjoy it. So I loved that, like, back and forth, the texting and the in-person back and forth about that in the beginning. So another thing that really popped out to me in this book, which I don't know why I really noticed it in this book because it happens in every one of your books, but everyone's like, you pay such attention to the detail of everyone's fashion sense because they do. Every character in your book has a fashion sense, whether no one is just throwing on jeans and a t-shirt. And if they do, you're like, he rolled out of bed and threw out a jeans and t-shirt. Like, we know he didn't put any effort in today, right? And I just love that. And you have a really great fashion sense personally. So I'm just wondering what you do to like build that for your characters.
Yeah. I mean, it's a part of my, well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, blue, right?
I know, right?
This is not a plan.
Hello? That just means that we are synced up already with our fashion sense. So there you go. So it all comes about when I'm doing like my planning for the book. And so like, I don't know, I think we might have talked about this before in another chat, but I am a little bit OCD and I have this crazy Excel spreadsheet for an outline that has like all these different columns about like, what's the mood in this scene? How is this driving the story? Like that kind of stuff. And part of that is also like trying to get at the 5 senses throughout each of the scenes in the book. So like, what are they wearing? What are you seeing that's around them? If there's like noise happening, what are you hearing? If they're eating something, what does that taste like? All of the 5 senses, right? And to do that, I always create like a Pinterest board for each book. And it just helps me start to it's selfish for me. It's to really get a sense of who this character is by like what it is that they gravitate to style wise, right? So if you're if you're a guy who like gravitates towards, like a two-piece suit all the time. That tells me as I'm writing the character, and should hopefully tell the reader something about that guy versus the guy who just throws on like a pair of basketball shorts and just goes on about his day, right? And one of the characters in the book, he's a guy who wears a suit but like tries to make it a little bit more casual. So he doesn't wear a suit with a button down shirt. He'll wear it with like a clean, crisp white t-shirt with some sneakers or some tennis shoes, right? And so you see a little bit of like, okay, he's a guy who's about his business, but he's trying not to be so, formal about it. He doesn't want to come off like a Wall Street bro, right? But the way that Gigi sees him is, okay, this guy clearly has a style uniform. He's clearly like thinking about how he's presenting himself when he goes about like his daily business. And that has her, thinking about, okay, so that means he's an intentional guy. That means that like there's a lot about him that's stable, that's secure, so it starts to hopefully tell you more about the characters than just, okay, maybe he likes a suit, right? Yeah, but I enjoy it. I think it's fun. If you were to sneak into my private Pinterest account, you would see a specific one for each one. And I just start grabbing and start playing around with like, okay, well, maybe they would wear this shirt with this skirt, and oh, these shoes would look really cool with that. Reagan would love that because she's all about the shoes, and she's gonna be the one to immediately clock that when she meets them and have some thoughts about what that means about that person, right? And so it's all like, it's both fun for me to do, but also it just helps me start to really tie in who the characters are and what their different little quirks are. And hopefully then relay that on the page to the reader.
Well, you're personally, I feel like you are doing that perfectly because I know. And when they all like get in the car, so there is like a week-long getaway, which I was like, all these people get to take an entire week off at the same time together to go upstate to a cabin. Congratulations.
I know, right?
I was thinking long weekend, nice. And then it was like a full week. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Just for a friend trip. That's great. Yeah. You guys are going to need a second vacation this year to do the,
I mean, to be fair, they did have time to plan for it. And, I was thinking about, it's not any of their like 40th birthdays or anything like that. But I do recall there's a couple years ago when me and all my friends were turning 40 and everyone wanted like a big trip and like a different type of trip, right? And so my trip was Turks, and my friends the ones who decided to come on the trip, they had to plan for a week off from work, and, we're all gonna just go down to the Caribbean and have a great time, and then probably need a day or two when you get back to decompress before you get back into work and be like, now what is it that I do for a living?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
But that sounds amazing though.
Oh, it was amazing.
That trip. I took a whole week.
I need to go back. I need to go back ASAP.
Yes.
My bank account doesn't want me to go back, but
it's only been 2 years, so you gotta keep saving up for that. That's the only downfall of taking like a big, really nice trip is now we're just reset. We're back at zero for whatever we're doing in the future. I guess we're going to New Orleans to visit family for the next X amount
basically
of time. Yeah, that's where we go. That's like I can go to Florida to visit my family. That's it.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing trip when they're getting together and getting ready to get in the cars. They're packing the cars and everything, and we get to see what everyone is wearing. And I love that almost everyone is in their like college sweatshirts.
Yeah.
And you do mention that it's summer, right? It's August. Is that correct?
Okay. It's June, yeah.
Oh, it's June. Okay. I was like, I couldn't remember exactly, but it's summer. And I know it's New York, and it's upstate New York. So, a sweater in the evening is probably realistic. But I was like, I'm dying down here just reading the book, going, it's so hot. And they're like, I just pulled up in my sweater. But you do mention it, and I appreciated that so much. You actually said, like, even though it's June or even though it's summer, I was like,
Yeah.
yes,
And
Darby, you
listen, it
knew.
gets hot here in New York too. I mean, I will not say that it gets as hot as New Orleans. Trust me, I
Of course.
understand. But it's a swamp too. So I always say, I have basically moved from swamp to swamp. I moved from New Orleans to DC to New York. I can't get away from the swamps. I can't get away from the humidity. Maybe one day. But I think at least with me and my friends, we have sort of like a travel uniform, and it tends to be something that has like our college's name or like symbol or whatever on it. And I'm thinking about like when I'm in the airport, if I'm doing like a road trip, it can be chilly in those things, even if it's hot outside. And so you're like, and you know what I've learned? The kids, this I'm making myself sound old when I say the kids, but like my nieces and nephew who are like in their teens and their early 20s, they all wear sweatshirts just regardless of the weather. It doesn't matter. They're just like, I'm gonna wear this sweatshirt and just be completely like drenched in sweat.
My son has a hoodie.
Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't
it just
matter
doesn't matter. Yeah. They're
what
like,
time of
I'm like, it's
year,
not hoodie
what
weather.
time of
It doesn't
day.
matter. It's a hoodie that I wanted to put on. So
Yeah, it just
at
goes
least
with
with these folks,
everything.
they're going to be in a car, the air is going to be blasting for like but I did, for my purposes, for the people my age, I felt like I had to say, like, I know it's June. I recognize that it's June, that it's probably hot outside, but they're planning to be in the car for a while and they're going to put on these sweatshirts.
Yeah, I think it sounds like they looked very cute with their
Yeah.
sweatshirts and their shorts. Some of
Yeah.
them,
A bunch of
I
people
was
had
in.
shorts on, right?
Yeah. No, I was there. I thought exactly like you said, they would be a little advertisement.
Yeah.
They were like the little J. Crew for their colleges, and they looked adorable in my mind. And then I just ripped that thing right off after we took the pictures.
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. And then, it's funny that you mentioned the style for that scene, because Brandon, who's supposed to be the guy who's like, he doesn't really like to fit neatly into anybody's box. He's the only one that's not wearing that sort of thing. And that's a prime example of me trying to give you like just a little nod to the reader, like, check out that this guy is different, right? Like he is purposely, he knows that they're all been friends for a while. He knows that they're going to show up in their Howard gear, their Morehouse gear, whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna wear what feels comfortable to me. I'm not wearing a sweatshirt. I'm hot,
Exactly. He's like, look, I'm the only smart one here.
Yeah.
Y'all sweating that. No, and that is it was really a good moment where we did get to see that. And also I think that even though he's absolutely in the friend group and they are friends, Gigi and Brandon are friends, it shows a little bit how he is like he's outside.
Yeah.
If so, even though they know each other, he hasn't like just assimilated to, he's not doing what everyone's doing just because they're doing it.
Yeah.
And that could be a positive or a negative if you're talking about somebody from your friend group.
That is true. That is true. And that tells you a lot about him. Like, he is a guy who's like, whatever, I'm sure we'll get to it, but like, he's like, you should always go for whatever makes you happy, right? Like, so he's just not a guy who is willing to go by, like, play by the straight and narrow, go by like whatever it is you think you should be doing. And that presents Gigi with these two opposite characters. You got this one guy who is absolutely like the epitome of sensible and secure, and he's intentional, and he's good looking and is charming and all this stuff. And then you've got this other guy who's like, does it make you happy? Go for it. I don't care if you're scared, you go for it. Right? Like, and like, okay, what is that? Which one do I go for? What does that mean for me?
Yeah, it's hard. And then it forces her to ask herself all these types of questions, right? Yeah. Because sometimes what kind of person are you, and then who do you need? Do you need someone to push you more, or do you need somebody to ground you more?
Right.
Those types of things. And so
I'm stealing that, Raina. I love that. When you hear me say it, just know. Yeah.
But it is. It's true. And then she's having to look inside, which is another like it's I try and okay, we're going to get a little bit off. Okay, Harlequin. All right. There's plenty of people in the world you say Harlequin romance and they shut down. And I love one of the things I really really love about your books is that all of those people are wrong. Your books have all like I love like there's so many aspects and layers to your books, and this is a great example of this because Gigi ends up having to look at herself a lot to make those types of decisions. And so on the surface, it's a love triangle, and it is, and it's great, and it's wonderful. But also there's all these things, and you see her having to think about who she is.
Yeah.
And that's not what people think, but it's true.
Romance gets such a bad rap, I think. Really does. And I used to, just admit, I used to think the same thing. I grew up and I would see my grandmother have Harlequin books, and all I remember is seeing Fabio on the cover and being like, this is not for me. Like, I don't know what's going on. But, as I got older, right, it's like, what is happening? I cannot relate. But as I got older and I actually started reading romance on my own, and I always say I actually got tricked into reading romance. I started reading books that people recommended to me that they were like, this is just a good book, but they didn't say it's a good romance book. And then lo and behold, it was like, oh, how come like all the books that I'm really enjoying who have these three-dimensional characters who are going through like some of the hardest stuff are actually packaged in what you would consider a romance novel, right? Because it has a happy ever after at the end or a happy for now. And, it has like the love story is certainly like the main plot. But one of my like writing heroes talks about the idea that romance allows you to actually cover so much because the thing is the reader knows that it's all going to work out in the end. And so you can actually put some of the hardest stuff in the book without it being traumatizing, right? Because you're like, hey, if you've dealt with insecurities or you've dealt with trying to figure out like what actually makes you feel fulfilled, or, you're struggling to figure out like, where do you actually want your career to go? I can put all that in there and I can layer that with the romance because that at the end, you're going to like, everything's going to work out. And I think especially in this time, like we all need a lot more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like romance novels are a safe space.
Yes.
Because
it's a safe space that you can cover some tough stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And that's not all of them, right? There's a place where there's romance is such a big umbrella that there's space for your Hallmark type stories, like your really sweetheart stories that are just like, look, I just want a good beach read. I just want something that's going to help me escape from this stuff. But the ones that I really resonate with, and then that informs like my writing, are the ones that are like, yeah, I've been through that. Like, I know how that feels. And then to see that person get their happy ever after at the end, it's like, oh, maybe I can too, So hopefully I can do that for others.
Yeah, and then everything is, romance, while you're in a relationship, other stuff is happening. Yes. It's the
life
way
is still happening.
Life is still happening. Like, most of the time for most people, the romance aspect is a component of.
Right.
And when you're with that person, a lot of times you're in a bubble. But when they go to work and you go to work, or you go to school, or you go to hang out with your friends, they're a piece of your life. And so I love how, it makes it more realistic that we remember that sometimes in the romance novels.
And I mean, maybe it's not that way for some people, but shout out to my mom. She's always made sure that her daughters were like, the romance is a part of your life. It's not, right. The goal in life is not the guy. It's not to have the happy ever after. It's to create a life that you love around, surrounded by people that, are there for you and you are there for them, and you can't, like, you don't want to not have them around you. And in the process of that, if you find love and you find someone who you want to do this crazy thing called life with, then, like, man, kudos to you. It's not an easy thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's like icing on the cake
Yeah.
of your life. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I had no notes to add to that. So yes, Mom, you got this. You're doing it right. At least teaching it correctly.
Yeah.
Well, we have made it to 6:30, but I want to share a couple of links with everybody. First of all, this one here. The first one is, if you want to get your hands on Darby's book as soon as possible, comes out on July 29th. You can use that link, order a copy right now. It'll get shipped out and you will get it on the 29th or very close to the 29th. But if you would like a signed copy and you can wait a couple more weeks, Darby's going to be here in New Orleans at Blue Cypress Books on the 9th of August. That is Bookstore Romance Day. So she's going to be here doing an event. And if you order it with this link through Blue Cypress, you'll get a signed copy, but it won't get shipped until after August 9th. So you'll have to wait a couple more weeks for it, but it will be a signed copy. So pros and cons there, y'all.
That's what this whole thing's about, right?
One of each is fine. You can grab one from the first link. It'll get sent out to you immediately. And then you grab one for the second link and get a second copy signed. Then you can give away that first copy to a friend who you know needs to read it. This is the perfect plan, y'all.
And my little nod is one of the things that it's like my side quest is to get more men to read romance novels. So I have been trying to say to my girls, buy one for you, buy one for your man or for your guy friend or for the guy who you want to be your man, whatever, right? But
that is an excellent test, actually. Good point. Guy you want to be your man. Give him this, watch his face, and then make your call. Make the call. Exactly. That's going to tell you a lot about whether or not this is going to work out long term. Yeah. So if he's willing to read it, though, and then you get to book club about it and talk about it later, just not lock that down.
I mean, that's definitely goes in the win column. That's for sure. But the thing is, it's great. It's great for us to read romance novels. It's great for us to feel seen and all that kind of stuff. But if the guys don't agree, if they don't buy in as well, and obviously we're talking about hetero relationships here, right? But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case because one of the characters, he's bisexual in the book, right? So whatever it is that works for you, but everybody needs to be bought into what it means to romance your partner, because otherwise then it's just one person having all these expectations and them not being fulfilled, right? So, and we don't want that. We want everybody to be happy and in love.
Yes,
that's what we want.
Everyone happy and in love. Yeah. You can add that to your mission. All right, y'all. Everybody, thank you for watching, and thank you, Linda, for your question. And Darby, thank you so much for joining me again for Book
Thank you for having me. And hopefully people will come on the 9th. I'm looking forward to seeing folks on the 9th. I'm excited to come back home. And then also see you in person, Raina. So
no, it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be Darby and Farah Rashan, whose books are also amazing.
Yes.
And so if you are anywhere in the greater New Orleans area, you should be at Blue Cypress on August 9th.
Absolutely.